Mummy? Mink trotted over to Volcano and pulled on the towel her mother was hanging to dry. How to get a fish? What? Where did that come from? Mink crossed her arms on her chest and pouted with quivering lips, warning Volcano that a refusal would lead to tears. Sadar says he can, and I can't 'cause I'm a wimp. Volcano rolled her eyes. There were times, rare times, that she almost wished Mink didn't remind her of Shiver quite so much. The man would not be bested, and neither would his daughter, even if that meant getting her hands in fish guts, apparently. Then again, it certainly wasn't Volcano's favorite task, and Mink could use another chore. Fine, bring the bowl and the fish to the kitchen. I'll be there in a moment. The pout turned to a grin, and Mink ran towards the basement. Volcano sighed and rolled her eyes again, for good measure. She reached to the basket for the last washed piece when someone rang the doorbell. "Come in," she said, heading for the door. It was late for a casual visit, or a peddler's call. Curious. The ringer turned out to be Rain, one of the dock workers. "Hey," he greeted her, but refused to come inside. No, I'm just bringing a message." "A message?" "Yes, you're needed at the port. The Hirarians are back, and they're asking for you." Volcano's chest clenched. It had been a month since the scientist had left. There had been no symptoms of the disease in anyone. She'd nearly forgotten about it. Nearly. Eva's news had never truly left her mind, and now all the muffled worry resurfaced. Why? Did they discover something else in the samples? Rain shrugged, and his lower lip widened in a helpless grimace. "I don't know. All the mates told us is that the captain wants to see you." Volcano grabbed the sweater from the hook and pushed Rain inside the house. "Show Mink how to get a fish," she said, and before Rain could respond, she shut the door in his face and rushed towards the docks. The smell of the Hirarian ship instantly brought back the memories from a month ago. But there was something different about it this time. A difficult to pinpoint shadow of a different aroma. Jarring, medicine-like. The foreigner took Volcano down the wooden stairs, where she was to meet with their captain. "He doesn't tolerate crowds well," the man explained when Volcano tried to find out the reason she was coming here alone. "They dull his thoughts." The door to the cabin opened and revealed a tall man in a purple uniform. Several elegant blue rose pins adorning his jacket glimmered in the subtle lamplight. "Thank you, Mushion, you can go now," he told his mate, then turned to Volcano and greeted her with a courteous bow. "Idanon Okaris," he introduced himself. "Volcano, as you know." "It's a pleasure. Please, do come in." "Why am I here? Is something wrong with us after all?" Okaris smiled. It was an odd, empty smile. Must be tired. Or perhaps he was sick. "Not at all," he said and stepped away, urging Volcano to join him in his cabin. She did so, a touch reluctant. "So what is it?" "First, you can relax. I'm healthy." She had not realized her worry was so obvious to read, but indeed her back was nearly pressed against the wall. "I apologize." Okaris waved his hand. "All is well. As to why you're here, I need to talk to the leader of the Wreath." "But I'm sorry," he interrupted her. "But I don't much care about your rule of law in this regard. You were the first to take action when your people could be in danger, and as far as I'm concerned, the rest is secondary." Okaris stated this as if it was the end of discussion. He sat down by the table and weaved his fingers together. "My people are sick, and I have no cure for them. They need to come to the Wreath, to the dust." He met Volcano's eyes. It was difficult to judge his age. His vibrant attire in the color of Majid orchid, the thick, dark hair brushed back and covered in gel, and his posture all spoke of youthful vitality. But his eyes told a whole different story, and even the skillfully applied makeup failed to hide the many wrinkles or the washed-out grey of his irises. He paused for a moment, and then said, "And they are already underway. I figured sending back ships of people who were promised deliverance should prove a much harder task for you than saying no to a preemptive request of mine." He simply revealed he was trying to manipulate them while asking them for a favor. Volcano was baffled. "Why would you admit that to me?" Okaris shrugged. "You'd find out anyway. I don't believe starting our relationship with deception would do it much good. Do you?" There was something about this man that made Volcano want to turn around and leave as quickly as she could. Be it the calm in his voice as he admitted his deception, or the complete lack of shame and hesitation in his words. It could also be that weary emptiness in his eyes. "How many people are there?" she asked. 5,000, together with the crews." 5,000? Surely he misspoke. We can't accommodate them," Volcano said. "Our entire population is 3,000 people." "I am aware of that. I'd never dare ask for your help, Volcano. All I want is permission to settle on the desert and to occasionally trade with your people," he said. "We are prepared to survive there." This was insane. Several thousand people. In the desert. "I can't make a call like this. I told you I'm not anyone's leader." "What if others refuse? What if they choose to send us away?" "They wouldn't do that." "So what's the harm? We don't come empty-handed. We have technology that can help your society, and we have teachers ready to educate your children." Now there was a hint of desperation ringing in his voice, but his eyes didn't change one bit. "I told you I can't make this call. You have to ask the border farmers and the desert path keepers. They live the closest to what you want. You know that if you say yes, they will have a harder time refusing." Volcano huffed. "Like I can't turn your ships around because they are already coming." "Yes, exactly. This was not me agreeing with this. I will not put my people in this situation. If you do, I will make sure your daughter is the first to get a teacher. She will become the future of the Wreath." "You don't understand, do you?" Volcano stepped towards the door and turned the handle. "It's not my call. Take your offer to the farmers and the keepers if you want. It's not mine to take. This isn't mainland. Your rules don't apply here." "Well, all right then. Let us not get hostile. I'll do as you say." "You are a formidable leader, Volcano," he said, and she meant to refute it again, but he didn't let her. "Don't." He raised his hand and barked a laugh. "I understand. Just take it as a compliment, nothing more." In a flash of paranoia, scaly flesh slitters in the distance, best ignored and forgotten. "Why formidable?" Volcano asked. "Because greed will only take a leader so far. Principles, on the other hand, can take you to the edge of the world." There were several ports on the Wreath, but most of them served only shallow water fishing expeditions. Western Shore was the only town prepared for mainland arrivals. The entire Hirarian fleet of 11 grand ships docked there, 2 by 2, letting the passengers disembark. The streets were empty now. All Belenian headed home to observe the match from behind the windows. The quarantine hour. With so much still unknown about the disease, Hirarians didn't want to take any risks. They walked from the docks towards the desert path in a somber column, covered from head to toe in protective clothing, as if they carried the deadliest plague. Those that could no longer walk were pushed on wheelchairs. One girl began coughing from the dust, and she tried to pull a scarf over her face, but her mother told her to stop, to breathe it in. "How can the dust be a cure?" Volcano asked Horizon, who stood at her side, though neither of them could know the answer. He shook his head, not taking his eyes off the bizarre march. It became a mesmerizing river of people, snaking through the narrow streets of the Western Shore as if they were banks, barely holding it in its bed. In one day, the population of the entire island would double. Mink and Seda, unaware of how big this was, lost interest quickly and returned to their bickering. "You can't count to 100. They won't pick you," Sedar yelled at her. "I so can." "Prove it." 1, 2, 3, 4. Volcano and Horizon looked at each other as if they shared a mind. Once Belenian had agreed to let Hirarians settle on the desert, the grateful guests proposed organizing a science camp for the kids. Of course, they couldn't take all the children at once, so it was decided that they'd take the winners of a small competition. Those would pioneer the new projects that other children would then continue. "God forbid one of them gets in and the other doesn't," Volcano whispered to Horizon. He shook his head in sympathetic horror. The Hirarian column of 6,000 souls was being closed by those who were not infected. They made sure no one was left behind and transported the heaviest supplies on carts. Belenian had heard of the advanced train transportation networks functioning on the mainland, but they never felt like they should, or could, invest in anything like that. "Sometimes I feel like time stands still on the reef," Volcano said. "Perhaps we need this. Something to shake us awake. Let us open to the world, start moving forward." Horizon frowned. "I don't like change." "None of us do. That might be the problem. We don't look at the past. But do we really look into the future?" "I think we do." Volcano took a moment before responding. "I don't. When the captain summoned me, he offered me a deal. If I agreed, he said Mink would be educated first, and she'd learn to become the future of the wreath. I can't stop thinking about it. It was exciting." "Well, it can still happen," Horizon smiled. "One thing is for sure. There is no stopping the changes now." Captain O'Caris was true to his word. He did not expect nor want much help. The only assistance he asked the Belenian for was lending their boats to the Hirarian sailors to help supply the big ships stationed in the deeper waters. He also manned them with his own people and supplied them with goods gathered from the new desert settlement, which they aptly named the Quarantine City. Volcano, Horizon, and some of the parents of the children chosen for the first science camp sat on the wet sand, letting the waves wash over their legs. It was getting late. The children were supposed to return an hour ago, yet there was no sign of any boats coming. From this beach, they could see just 2 of the great ships, Were it not for the strings of lights adorning their sides and shining through the dust, the behemoths could be taken for storm clouds lurking near the water surface. A Belenian supply ship, such a little bird in comparison, maneuvered between them, assisting the crews with further algae research. Should they squint and look past what is clear to see, they might notice the snake's body still for a second in contentment, as the predator finds its tail and closes the coil. Mink was nearby, chattering with her friend about who would go on the next camp. It was probably the last moment of peace before Cedar was back and began boasting about his pioneer status. Indeed, the past 3 weeks had not been easy for Volcano, courtesy of a very, very jealous Mink. "Mommy," she ran towards Volcano and fell to her knees. "Do you think they will now pick the kids that came to this meeting?" "I don't know," Volcano answered. It didn't matter what she said. When it came to the camp talk, Mink was not discouraged. Mink was never discouraged. "Do you think they teach them how to cure people?" she asked. "From the disease?" "No, they're teaching them marine technologies. They went to one of the shots to have access to the deeper water." Volcano pointed ahead. Where the reef's air clean, they could see them, small, infertile islands, where the Hirarian technology could be used to its full potential. Mink pouted. "But people are sick. Like Daddy. We should cure them first." "Yes, but we don't know how to. That's why it's important to learn and keep getting smarter." Volcano tapped Mink's nose and pulled her closer. "And it doesn't have to be at the camp." The serpentine coil moves, and the vigilant can see the shadow of motion. Like a phantasm, a hallucination they are still too afraid to mention, not to appear insane. One of the mothers spoke up. "We can always go to the Westland PS warehouse and ask the clerk if there were no mistakes. Maybe they have noted a different hour." "Or they just don't care to be on time," Horizon suggested. "I can imagine this or that took longer than expected. It's working with kids after all." "They got a warehouse in Westland Pier as well?" Volcano asked. "We've lent them one by the hour docks, but that's understandable, they have ships nearby." "Yeah," the woman said. "They asked and it was abandoned. There was no real reason to say no." They look at each other, almost ready to point and ask, "Do you see it too?" 36 days. At a glance, their lives hadn't changed much. The Hirarian influence seeped into their society with flawless finesse, gentle and kind, free of any conflict that could cause an alert. The guests had asked for permission for all of their moves, and Belenian had granted it, feeling in control. Yet every one of those requests had been hard to refuse. The choices, despite the appearance of being fair, always came when things were already in motion. The funniest thing was, the captain had told Volcano straight up they worked this way. And yet, it didn't matter. She'd missed it, still viewing the foreigners through the lens of her kind. Until this very moment. The children are not coming back. Like a dark premonition, she heard these words in her mind before they fell from Iva's lips. Before he came to the beach in the company of 5 Hirarians, yet not a single child, and tried to tell the parents everything was fine. Volcano heard them before she faced the barrel of a concealed gun, and before the final piece of the puzzle fell into its place. The camp has exceeded our expectations, Eva said with a smile. The children have learned all the basics, and we've decided together that it would be best if they were the ones to teach the next group and test their knowledge this way. So they're still on the island? A father asked. Yes, and of course, so are the adults that are taking care of them. So once another group of 20 is ready to go, we shall take them to the camp, let the pioneers show them the ropes, and then bring the first group back. You should have asked the parents before deciding that, Volcano said. Eva was avoiding everyone's eyes, looking somewhere beyond them. It was trivial to miss. His warm smile covered it well. He turned to Volcano, but as he addressed her directly, his gaze was still distant and unfocused. I have only found out today, actually, once we've received a notice from our researchers. I think the kids should return first. It's not a long trip. There is no reason they can't go back there afterwards. But one of the mothers asked, It's a needless complication, isn't it? Yes, absolutely, Eva nodded. They are operating the devices, and we need a smooth change of guard there, not to undo their amazing progress. Each bit alone meant nothing. Desperate people coming to a place where the air could cure them, afraid of hearing no. Understandable. A fleet in need of supplies asking to borrow smaller vessels. Of course. Traders coming to the local towns and staying around to keep the wheel turning. Well, what an obvious thing. And of course, it's difficult to operate without a warehouse. And the plans can change too. And a science camp can turn out different than planned at first. It's only natural. Sometimes you ask too late. Yet together, they created a coil of a constrictor snake that circled its victim, tricking it to believe it had no ill intent, while in reality, well, I'm sure your researchers can keep it going for a day, Volcano said, and they would probably appreciate a moment of respite. There is no need for that, truly. Volcano, they know what they're doing. Idil patted her on the shoulder. We should run another contest. No, Volcano turned to her. They were blind. They were all still either blind or afraid to look. No children will go to the camp until we see the 20. What's gotten into you? Horizon whispered to her. Volcano turned to Eva. He was tense. For the first time since he came to the beach, he met her eyes, and he was not smiling anymore. She said, Take me to the children. They can keep their posts. I want to see what they are working on. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, slowly, quietly, I can't do that. He wasn't ready for the confrontation. He was lost. So she pushed. Why not? Nothing. Why not? She stepped forward, and one of the 5 men reached to the back of his azure sash and pulled a gun. He aimed it at Volcano, and everything stopped. Eva's eyes widened. He turned to the man and shoved his arm down and slapped the weapon out of his hand. But when he turned back to the Belenian, it was too late, and he knew it. And so he said simply, You must send another 20. Volcano shook her head. No. Many Hirarian traders were walking through the streets of Belenian towns now, learning to navigate them, getting to know their secrets. They all wore these wide azure sashes, and everyone thought, it had been implied by the foreigners themselves, that they merely marked the healthy, the uninfected. Wrong. Then the children we have are not coming back, Eva said. One will return for each one that arrives. Volcano stepped back and reached for Ming's hand, already waiting for her, shaky. Volcano, Horizon turned to her. Volcano, Cedar is there. She shook her head. Volcano! He grabbed her arm, but she tore it out of his grasp, picked up Ming, and started running. Her heart was pounding. Everything else seemed dulled, muffled, as if behind a glass wall. The heartbeat trumped all the other sounds, the confused questions and pleas of the parents, the echoing of her name. She escaped as if monsters gave chase, as if their claws were reaching for Ming. Mommy, my arm hurts! The girl tried to wiggle out of her grasp, but Volcano didn't care. Mommy! Quiet! She shushed the child. They needed to get home. Right now, nothing else mattered. The door shut, the lock clicked. Volcano dropped Ming on the sofa and thumped against the wall, dazed. She knew she was in her house, but even that didn't feel familiar. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. Ming's crying was the first sound that began to pierce through the glass. Volcano fell to her knees by the sofa and moved away, the little hand squeezing the girl's right forearm. A small bruise was forming on the white flesh. Oh, Lark, I'm sorry. Volcano raised the arm to her lips and gave it a kiss. I was scared, she answered, in her mind. But her thoughts were not for Ming. So instead she said, I didn't mean to squeeze you so hard. I'm sorry. Mommy, what's wrong? I don't know. I'm terrified. Nothing, Lark. That man made me angry and we had to go. She gently stroked the bruised forearm. Did something happen at the camp? Is Cedar okay? Absolutely. You're shaking. Volcano forced a smile, which couldn't last. And so before it faded, she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. I'm just a bit cold, see? She pressed the cool tips of her fingers to Ming's cheek. Then she lied, as was mothers do. Everything will be fine.